Hello, everyone, and welcome to AGNT Speaks, where each week we come together as your AGNT Leadership Council to share a meditation, an affirmative prayer, or a message. And today we are gathered together to commune, to share a powerful message, to experience two of my beloved colleagues, Lola Wright and Deborah Johnson. We are ministers in the field of New Thought, and we are here today for a mindful message. I am your host, Erin McCabe, and I come to you from Unity Village Chapel, and my friends here come from Chicago and Santa Cruz today. And so we are coming to you live. I have a passion to awaken mindfulness, cultivate care, and inspire action. And today is a day that is a conversation we're going to be having. So thank you for joining in. If you want to tag this, host a watch party, let anyone know that you're here and they can be part of this conversation. We're going to start off today together in the live stream, and then you'll have an opportunity to get up close and personal with your comments, your questions, your prayer requests in the Zoom room with these two beloveds. So today I want to welcome you both here. Thank you for being here. Thank you for taking the time in your day, in your schedule, and let's get started for today.
Thank you, Erin. Very grateful to be here. Grateful to be here with the brilliant Deborah Johnson, and happy to serve and support human beings that are listening, tuning in. I think what feels most appropriate is just to check in, like, what is on your heart and mind, Reverend Deborah? What is on my heart and mind in this now moment? You know, just before we jumped on here, I was on LinkedIn, and a friend's business posted something that said, you know, that which is on everybody's mind these days is reopen America. And I commented and I said, you know, I'm not actually sure that that's what's on everybody's mind these days. And so I'm curious for you, Reverend Deborah, what is on your mind in this now moment? I can't hear you, Reverend Deborah, you're muted.
I want to say thank you to everybody for joining us, and it's my pleasure to be here with my esteemed colleagues, Erin and Lola. And you know what? There's always something that's on our minds. There's always. And then there are these moments where we have kind of like a collective, where we are vibrating or we're thinking about the same things at the same time. What I know is that this is just an extraordinary moment in history, unlike any other. And you have, to me, I think the two biggest things that I hear resonating out in the collective consciousness now is, one, the impacts of the COVID virus, which is, I think, this question about the reopen. And the other has to do with, where do we go from here in terms of social justice? And people really being tired of the kind of systemic racism and oppressions that we're seeing, and hit that tipping point of enough is enough with the murder of George Floyd and all of the demonstrations that we've been seeing for days on end across the nation, really calling for a moment of transformation.
So one of the things that you and I were talking about as we prepared for this morning's gathering was, you know, what does the embodiment of oneness look like? You know, and one of the things you mentioned was that, like, you're moving into a chapter in your work where it's like, hey, look, if you're not up to the conversation of oneness, like, you know, feel free to move along, because that's what I'm about. And, you know, I would just love to hear, I'm always curious when people use the word oneness, what do they actually mean? Because it's a wonderful and lofty concept that very few have embodied as demonstrated by the human experience. So I'm curious, like, when you say that, what does that mean for you?
What it means for me is that there's just one creative power, energy force in the universe, and absolutely everything comes out of it. That there's nothing outside of the infinite. And that in order for us to really have a sustainable world, that we have to appreciate the sacred interconnectedness of all life. And that part of our problem here, I love the way that my mentor Beckwith always put it, that the only thing that ever needs to be healed is just a sense of separation. Mm-hmm. Separation from the planet, from each other, from our good, from our health, our wealth, like whatever. And that when I look at the world's problems, that's what I see, like this kind of sense of separation. And where this plays out in human relationships is a profound othering. Mm-hmm. There's this othering. and whenever you have this othering, you dehumanize. Whenever you have this othering, there's discrepancies and disparities in how people are treated. And in the othering, there's a tendency not to see other people as a reflection of you. Mm-hmm. So what this means from an embodiment standpoint is that when I see you, I don't see you as a separate person. I see you as part of the same life that I am sharing. Mm-hmm. That's where that embodiment comes, is if you're laying on the street, obviously without a home or shelter or whatever, I'm not just stepping over you and going, whew, I'm so glad I'm blessed.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think the other thing that is, I have deep interest in, that I've, constantly interrogating the application of this is, I think that sometimes we can hear this practice of oneness as like, well, not all fill in the blank are bad. And I'm actually much more interested in exploring the consciousness that creates the systems that we are entrenched in.
Exactly.
So for me, it's not about, are all cops good or bad? Are all like that? That's like, this is that, if that's the place in which we're talking about oneness, we got a lot of work to do. So exactly. How do you articulate, explain, teach the application of oneness at a systems level?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, what I explain to people is that it still goes back to this point about the otherness. That from a systemic standpoint, anytime you talk about the isms, they have two components. There's the attitudinal component, the prejudicial component, in which you're seeing some people as being higher or lower than other people. And then there's the way that we have institutionalized that bias in all of our systems, in all of our structures. It's not enough to just change your mind and say, oh, we're all equal, when brick by brick, we have put these walls that have created these blocks to access. So it has to go down the same way it went up, brick by brick. Where there has been exclusion, there has to be inclusion. Where there has been whatever redlining in districts and keeping people from money and assets, there have to be opportunities opening up and to create the assets. I mean, there literally has to be a reversal and an amends. Mm-hmm. But you can't heal what you don't feel. Mm-hmm. So as long as we stay in denial about what's happened, we can't take the action. Feel, deal, and heal.
Yeah, and I like that when you said, if you can't feel it, you can't heal it. When we're talking about oneness, that experience, oneness is an experience. It's a spiritual consciousness. It's a spiritual concept. So when the mind, or the separate sense of self, the ego, goes into judgment, classification, I have to make an evaluation here. I have to pick a side here. I have to make a decision here. That's all ego. Self and spiritual principle simply presences. It opens up. It bursts forth compassion. It extends love, which is a harmonizing faculty. It does all of these things. It comes from a place of expansion. It comes from a place of inclusion. And it comes from a place where oneness is evidenced by how we show up, not from an ego sense of self, but by, seeking understanding, seeking compassion, seeking to behold the beloved on earth, on this human experience and in this divine expression.
Yeah. It starts from the inside out. I'm talking about radical inclusion. So when we talk about the pure embodiment of it, when I look at George Floyd pleading for his life, when I'm marching out there in the streets, I'm not just marching for George Floyd. I am marching to help the soul of the one that has the knee on the neck. Like Martin Luther King Jr. said, he says, everybody wants to live long, but if my physical death will save my children and my white brothers from a permanent psychological death, then I can think of no other act that is more redemptive. And this is where we kind of miss it about the isms and the dismantling, is that we keep thinking that it's about the discrimination, that it's about the marginalization. No, that's just the means to the ends. That's just the means to the ends. The real problem is the supremacy. And what we were watching was not just the impact of supremacy on Black people, but the impact of supremacy on white people.
Hello.
That it dehumanizes both. That the man on the ground wasn't being treated like a human, and the one who had the knee on the neck wasn't acting like a human.
That's right.
Yeah. Whew.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, I think the other thing that there is for, you know, the new thought community to develop into is a more sober relationship with anger. I think that we have a very adolescent relationship with anger. The mind does the same thing. It sort of, you know, it idealizes this quality of being nice. And I think that there's a spiritual maturation required to understand the place and space for holy anger, and that is not separate and apart from this concept called oneness. And so, yeah, I mean, I'd be curious to know if either of you have any thoughts on that. How do you be with anger consciously?
Well,
That's a deep dive. Holy anger. Deborah?
Well, one of the things I think that we miss about anger is that anger is one of the expressions of grief. Okay, the rage that we see out in the streets right now, it is also grief. We don't know how to grieve. But here's the thing about grief. We don't just grieve the things that we had and lost. We also grieve the things we didn't have. And in some respects, that's the deeper grief. If a marriage dissolves, long after they don't even want to be with each other, the grief isn't about the relationship that they no longer have, but the dream of the relationship that they thought it could have been. The dream is the last thing to go. So what you see out in the streets now isn't just the rage about the oppression that has happened, but the dream of equality, the dream of justice, the dream of freedom that's unrequited, and people are pissed at the grief of not tasting it and having it yet.
Yeah, and I think also you know, if we look in the human condition, when we have anger or when we have rage, you know, the opposite expression or demonstration is depression, pressing down, pressing in. When everything has been pressed in as far as it can be pressed in and pressed down as far as it can be pressed down, and there's no more depression that can happen, it is going to turn into anger, and energy has to be moved. Energy has to be presence. Energy has to shift to transform, or, you know, like you were saying, Deborah, there's a death of more than the human body. There's a death of the soul. You know, the spirit starts dying out and something else is there that is, you know, that is just impotent. It just has no life. So that process of the movement of energy, this is something that is very understandable. You know, anyone that dives into spiritual psychology and experience can really have a pretty deep understanding of what's going on. We're talking about systems, we're talking about emotions, we're talking about collective consciousness, we're talking about individual consciousness. So I want to thank you both for activating a power-filled conversation today. If you, as someone that is listening live stream, want to get up close and personal in the Zoom room, if you have something to say, something to share, something to be heard, please join us. Go ahead and hop on, register, and hop in the Zoom link. We have a few minutes here that we will be communing together, and you will have the time to get up close and personal. So please do that. And as we welcome you into the Zoom room, we have another message from Deborah and Lola. Thank you.
By the state of our country. I'm encouraged by the state of the planet, because here's what I know. There are systems and structures that are dying, and we are the ones that have been placed on the planet at this now moment to hospice that which is dying. And we can do that in a way that is uncomfortable and upsetting, or we can do it with love and compassion, still be fierce. Okay, something's dying, let me be present, and now we must midwife new life. So I think the call to action is, what is dying in ourselves that needs to be honored? It's time to let that go. What is dying in our movement, the thing that does not work for us? It's the blind spot. Are we ready to step into the new life? What I hear Reverend Temple and all of us saying is there's something new emerging. Let's do this. Are you ready? Are you willing to become the next greatest version of you? And that means stepping outside of our comfort zone. That means saying the thing that may not be popular, but knowing that it is grounded in the truth of who you are. If you sense something is not right, that is your intuitive nature, and you can speak to that. That is not off principle. So there is a new emerging conversation that's happening in this movement. I'm excited to be a part of it. I'm excited that you're a part of it. And I look forward to seeing, as we are bolder together, what could be made possible on the planet. Because as you say yes, as we each say yes, something new opens up. So very grateful to be here.
I think yep, here we go. We're going to have another clip
That
from
happened.
Reverend.
This noble thing about, in the Declaration of Independence, this preamble that says that we are all created equal, that this truth is self-evident. It doesn't even have to be proven. It's so self-evident that all men are created equal. Now, back then they didn't mean all men, let alone everybody. And are endowed by their creator. Ooh, that's as a spiritual manifesto here. It's not given by the government. It's not given by your station in life. Endowed by their creator with certainly inalienable rights. You can't even take it away. And just among these, not an exhaustive list, just among these is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Yeah. Those words have inspired democracies all over the world. Those words inspired Martin Luther King Jr., the civil rights movement. They were shoes that were too big to be filled in that day. That's right. Listen to what I'm saying. It's just like when your mom buys you the stuff and you don't want to make it too small because you're going to outgrow it. We built a foundation for this nation that was too big for the consciousness of the day. Let that sink in for a moment. It was too great and grand and glorious of an idea for the mentality of the day. And we are in the process of growing into that. Yes.
Thank you all for joining us live here with AGNT Speaks. We will be here next Wednesday coming to you live. And if you want to hop on the Zoom room right now, we will have a chance to get connected, learn more about all of our AGNT leaders in the link below. Find a local New Thought Center near you in the link below, or most of our leaders have services that you can join live stream at any time. So those clips that you saw were live from Unity Village Chapel and also live from Reverend Deborah's Sanctuary. We have rallies every quarter, and so we come to your areas. So keep in touch, stay in tune. Let's hop into the Zoom room. I want to thank everyone for joining us live today. All right.